The round of applause probably isn't deserved. Comrades and distinguished guests, in the news last night, the university announced that there will be a task force to investigate and prevent future violent assaults against students. And in the news last night, the Tasmania Police Force also announced that they will be establishing a task force to prevent future violent assaults against students. Why have these announcements been made? Because students refused to sit idly by while some of those amongst us were subject to violent, alcohol-fuelled assaults. Students stood up and created an intimidating ripple in the stagnant pond of the university by getting our views into the media. So I can confidently say that these announcements made by the university and the police are a success for students, and they are a resounding success for all of us, regardless of our race, gender or beliefs. The attacks that we are aware of at this point have been against international students. But the police have said to us that they don't believe that these attacks are racially motivated, which personally I'm very happy to hear. But if we accept that assessment, then we are all potentially the target of violent assaults. And if we do not accept that assessment, then it is obvious that more needs to be done to prevent racist attitudes and violent assaults against international students. The worst thing that we can do is be indifferent to these assaults. Indifference can be seductive because it is easy. It is always easier to ignore the victims. It is easier to avoid the distractions to our work, to our study, to our comfortable middle-class lives. But there is very little value that you can assign to your life if you can ignore the suffering of those people around you. Indifference, after all, has no value. All indifference serves to do is make the suffering of victims worse when they realise that their plight is being ignored. Unlike racism or hatred, indifference provokes no response. Violence at least, and racism at least, can be condemned, fought, and hopefully disarmed. We cannot solve the problem of attacks against students and the underlying issues like violence and racism if we are indifferent to them. And this is why the TEU welcomes the announcements made by the university and the police, and that is why we say that they are a victory for students, because these institutions are announcing that they are not indifferent. The TEU had a meeting with the police earlier this week, from which we understand that there has been an increase in the number of plainclothes police officers patrolling around the university grounds. We also understand that the university is considering increasing security measures, such as adding more security cameras and lighting and increasing security patrols. We also welcome these developments, but we still wonder how these announcements will develop into students being and students feeling safer. We will wait and watch how these task forces operate. We will question what they achieve, and we demand the detail of exactly what they offer students and how these things will be achieved are released. There need to be dates for the introduction of new security measures at the university, for example. We must be able to observe that progress is actually being made. Many of you might be aware that, or many of you might not be aware rather, that until early 2009 the university already had a task force to deal with student safety. They renamed it, removing safety from the name, and it is now called the Cultural Awareness Task Force. So we would be clever to doubt what exactly a task force alone can achieve, especially if a task force can be easily renamed. To the police, thank you for shrugging off indifference and publicly stating your commitment to this problem. To the university, we will wait and see what your announcements actually deliver for students. And to students, conquer indifference. If it creeps back in, then the threat of violence and intimidation will continue to hang heavy over the heads of students at the university, and no one should have to put up with violence or intimidation.